I'm a registered dietitian. I work here locally in Cincinnati. I work in a couple different capacities. So I teach fitness and I also do nutrition counseling, consulting for big groups of people, wellness correspondence with corporations, and then I also work at Children's Hospital. So I do, clinical counseling, things like that. I am in this field because I love eating and I love food, and I love that food can be such a nourishing aspect of our lives, and the intersection of that with nutrition and fitness is just really kind of where I find like a sweet spot of like balance and, kind of helping nurture that in other people.
Awesome. Okay, so you have examined the Pure 21 book.
Yes.
So can you tell us a little bit about, can you just tell me
Yeah,
I went through the book, I helped advise.
Yeah, exactly. So I did go through the book pretty much front to back, start in the middle, rewind, make sure that everything was super easy to follow. And it is. It's, a blueprint to success. And I think that like diving in, whether you know a lot about nutrition or you are a first time kind of investigator in this world, I think you're going to find that it's just very easy roadmap to applying these principles, finding recipes that suit you, and just, kind of just diving right in and not feeling intimidated.
That's awesome. Because I think that's one of the things that some of our partners are nervous about. Mm-hmm. Will I be able to do it? But as you said, it's pretty easy to follow.
Yes, absolutely. It's got a well-laid roadmap of, okay, here are the foods we want you to be eating on these weeks. Here are the supplements. Here's why you're doing it, which I think helps you ingest and really apply it of, you're not just telling me to eat these things because you like the color of it or whatever. It's got the background and the scientific evidence that support why we're doing what we're doing, which again, as we get older, I think having that application of why is this in here really helps.
100%. Okay, let's talk about week 1. So what really are first? What are digestive enzymes?
So the digestive enzymes, kind of think of those as like our helper bees. Essentially, we are taking food into our body, and those are essentially helping digest or break down the individual components of that food. Essentially, in our gut, in our stomach, and then into our gut, we have enzymes that are normally there. Sometimes those enzymes aren't working up to their best capacity, and so taking in some enzymes, or again, those kind of like helper bees or assistants, will help break down those different food particles and absorb and get the most out of that. So think of those as kind of just, again, your assistant. They're helping you make calls, send emails, but I digest and absorb food. So we really get the most out of them.
That was the best explanation. I think calling them helper bees is a really easy way to understand it. Yeah. Okay. What about the vitamins? Why are vitamins important in this week 1 and throughout the challenge?
For sure. So again, I think of vitamins as, so again, another analogy, they're just your insurance policy. You're not going to eat perfect every single day. We're not expecting that, and we never want to leave gaps. So essentially it's an insurance policy of like, we're covering your bases. If you're not getting all of your vitamin A today, you've got that. And so then those vitamins and minerals are, again, your assistants in helping all of the processes in our body work the way that they should. So whether that's burning energy or transporting nutrients, we've got all of those different things that are happening in our body. And vitamins are helping do that, essentially.
So what happens when somebody's body doesn't have the necessary vitamins?
So if we don't have them, maybe we don't have them in our food, maybe we've got them stored in our liver or stored in our muscle. It's just going to take a little bit longer for our body to send signals to then go grab that vitamin or that mineral and then bring it to where it needs it. So essentially we're cutting out the middleman of like searching for wherever it might be, or it might just be speeding up that process. So it's allowing us to be a lot more efficient with, from point A to point B, we can cut out some of those middle steps with those vitamins right there and then.
Everyone says, and there's that Harvard study, that 21 days makes a habit. Do you believe in that? Have you seen that in your work?
Absolutely. I think that giving yourself, for some people, they hear 21 days, they're like, that's a long time. That's the time it takes for you to make something a habit so that it's just rote and you don't have to think about it. So I would say give yourself at least 21 days. Most goals, most habits, again, like brushing your teeth or some of those unconscious things, could take even longer than that. So I would say give yourself a minimum of 21 days and just know that, those small, simple steps are what's going to set you up for that lifetime of success. 21 days out of the course of a year is, a blink of an eye. I feel like the past 2 years of, COVID have been a blink at that. So think about how much you could have, built onto that if we take those small steps. So 21 days, absolutely, especially when we're thinking about food, which is something that incorporates so much of our day. It's important that we really give it that focus.
Awesome. That was a great answer. All right, so during the first 2 weeks, you're not supposed to have any carbs. So explain what that's doing to the body. Why is this?
Yeah.
And that's probably one of the hardest things for people.
Exactly. So in those first 2 weeks, we are taking out, again, what I want you to think about is we're maybe not necessarily even think about what you're taking out. Think about what we are focusing on and what foods are encouraged on those lists of things to eat. We're still getting carbohydrates from things like our fruits, our vegetables. We're just eliminating and kind of giving our body some space away from some of the different grains and the wheat products. Unfortunately, so much of what is pervasive in our country are processed carbohydrates. You go out to dinner and you get the chips or the bread basket, and it's what are we having for dinner? It's, there's always, that seems to be the focus in so many cases, and in a lot of those cases we become lenient on those, and we don't really know how much are kind of sneaking in. So number one, first, it's kind of that mental capacity that we're not leaning onto those foods so much. The standard American breakfast is pancakes and biscuits and waffles and cereal, and they're great. Right. They're great. We're not saying that we want you to get rid of them forever, but this initial 2 weeks is that the flex of the muscle of, I don't need these things. I'm getting carbohydrates in that source from fruits and vegetables, lean proteins, and so we're flexing that muscle. Number two, so it's a mental thing, but it's also when we are, decreasing our intake of carbohydrates, we are promoting fat for fuel. And so in a lot of the cases, I can't say, the why of what you're doing this for, but it is going to promote that fat as a fuel source so that we are burning that as kind of a primary, source of energy. So
a lot of our testers that have gone through the program and a lot of people that have gone through it with the other company have lost a significant amount in the first week or two because of this.
Yes.
Because they're turning fat to fuel.
Exactly. There's also, and I totally transparently, carbohydrates and water are attracted to each other. So when we eliminate a lot of the wheat and the grain products, a lot of the extra water that we're holding on to is also going to be shed. So it's definitely that fat is fuel, but we're also losing some of the water weight that we might be holding on to that we don't necessarily need. So that said, I always pump the water, keep it going, because we want to stay hydrated when we might be losing some of that, that water that the carbohydrates are holding on to.
That is very interesting. I did not know that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's change a little bit to talk about gut health,
yep.
which is one of the, it's a buzzword these days.
Mm-hmm.
So why do you think it is a buzzword these days? What's going on?
Our gut is our second brain. That's been called that. Essentially, it is the pathway for anything to come into our body. So whether it's good, it's bad, it's not supposed to be there, that is where we get everything that's going to come in or go out. It's one of the largest organs, and so giving it that same respect that we give to our heart, our brain, is super, super important. It's just not like the attractive or sexy, muscles, but it is a muscle. It's got all of the different innervated tissue, and so essentially there is more bacteria in our body than most of us want to give credit to too. We've got more bacterial cells in our gut than probably, living cells in the rest of our body. And so treating that bacteria as, a very important, again, worker bees, assistants is going to go a long, long way. So we have to make sure that our gut is healthy because we want to keep out the bad and keep, again, that nutrition and all of the different vitamins and minerals being absorbed.
So how can we make sure our gut is healthy?
So we can do that in a couple ways. Number one, thinking about the good lane, what do we want? We want pro and prebiotics.
Okay.
So we are introducing the probiotic into the 21 day of our process. And so we don't do that right away because we're going to give those digestive enzymes some time to work. when we enter into those probiotics, those are actually food for those gut bacteria. We can also do that with food. So sources, once we bring in some of the dairy products later down the road, or anything that's fermented, like sauerkraut, tempeh, or kombucha, those are also good sources of those bacteria that we're just going to directly eat. The probiotics in our stomach also want to eat, and so they want those prebiotics, and those are in things like fibers. So fibrous vegetables and fruits, and then eventually those whole grains are going to, again, essentially they're indigestible, so we won't absorb them into our body, but they essentially just hang out as food for our gut, keep those villi happy, and then they pass through our system.
Okay.
So that's the good lane. We want the pro and prebiotics, fibers, all of that. And then the lane that we want to kind of avoid are essentially stressors for our gut. And those are things that cause inflammation in our body. And I know that's another buzzword. Essentially,
Yes.
it's things that kind of cause us to vibrate at a high frequency and cause stress and damage. So things like alcohol, highly processed foods, things that are high in trans fats, and also some very high saturated fats foods, as well as sodium, can cause some of that inflammation. When we think about inflammation or a pro-inflammatory state, we're think about a balloon that's just about to pop. It's just, it might even be shaking because it's so full of things that it doesn't necessarily want to be.
So what does clean eating mean, and why in the wellness journey when people are like, oh, this is all about eating clean, why is that important, like, down the road?
Yeah, so I think setting clean eating as like a non-negotiable. Like that should be at least the 80% of our life is nutrients and food as nature intended it to be. So think of eating from like the earth, the sea, and the sky. And as minimally processed as possible is always best, because that's essentially how our bodies were kind of made and developed to digest and absorb. So thinking about eating foods that are one ingredient, and I don't mean you like can only eat chicken, but like let's say you pick up a package of something and there's a million ingredients on there. Trying to find things that are just one ingredient on that label are really important. When we get into all of the parentheses and the additives and the fillers, we get a lot of the junk and the preservatives that, again, our body doesn't know what to do with, and so it kind of hits that like state of inflammation where your body is kind of in that fight or flight mode, almost like a small state of that, but it's just trying to clear out the chaos. Anytime you take something out, you're probably putting something into it. And so when we took out fat, we oftentimes added in fillers, sugar, other ingredients that just didn't need to be there and were not necessarily contributing to our health in the long term. So when we take out fat, we are typically adding in sugar or carbohydrates, which we know in excess are going to drive up our triglycerides. So generally speaking, fat, again, in moderation is great, especially for females. Hormone health is largely dependent on our healthy fat intake. The satiation from foods, so like getting that nice mouth feel as well as the fullness in our stomach, comes from fat. So it's definitely not something that we want to like totally avoid or lean into that low fat craze.
Okay, now a lot of people in my life have cut out dairy and have been like felt so much better because of that. So can you explain why some people are better off like limiting dairy or?
Sure. So when we think back to, again, those digestive enzymes, lactose is in dairy products, and our lactase enzyme helps digest and absorb that. It's the first one to go in our stomach. So oftentimes if people, are like, I took out dairy, I feel great. Well, they may have been lactose intolerant and not realized it. It's not a routine test that your doctor will necessarily put in. They'll say, hey, try to avoid dairy. Just number one, see if you can do it, and then see if symptoms help. So it's one of those, it's the first to go in our gut. So oftentimes for people, it's definitely something that can help. The other thing is dairy can be highly processed. So again, leaning into those minimal ingredients and just kind of as nature intended. I will also say that dairy is probably one of those like gateway foods that a little is great, but a lot is, easy to kind of get lost in. So portion control can just be tough. And again, too much of a good thing can cause constipation and diarrhea in anyone.
Got it. Okay, what is a good dairy alternative?
Yeah, so when we think about dairy alternatives, again, we're taking out the dairy, so we want to make sure we're not loading it with a lot of alternatives. And with dairy, I think ask yourself, what was the purpose of X or Y in that diet? So if for you milk is just into your coffee, you could choose something like a soy or an almond milk because it's just a nice little splash. If dairy for you was like a good source of protein in your smoothie, then maybe you do a lactose-free milk. You can, find some of the Fairlifes or the Kefirs that are just lactose-free and might be better. And then, if dairy for you is, cheese on a pizza, well, some of the dairy alternatives might not melt as well. So instead, think, what can I give myself that same mouthfeel? Maybe you can make like a cashew or a sweet potato cream sauce. Again, that might sound a little weird and obscure, but there are recipes for it. So, kind of leaning into, again, thinking back to what was the purpose of this item, and then kind of finding an alternative without adding in a bunch of, again, those sugar preservatives. Whey powder is essentially a very pure source of protein from milk or from dairy. So essentially, it is super well digested and absorbed in our body, and it's got a very high protein component to it. So it is going to, number one, keep us full, keep us healthy in that regard. It's also essentially, if we're being active, we're working out, it's going to rebuild that muscle tissue that we are, essentially tearing down in exercise. So when we break the muscle apart, we want to build it back up, and whey is a good way to do that.
When's it best to have this whey powder? If say you're just going to have it once a day, when would be best?
Yeah, so I would typically do it if you are being active. Do it, 30 to 60 minutes after without feeling like you have to hold on to that time frame. There is new literature out there that says, you don't have to have it in that, quick window. But I do think if you, are going to have it, that is a good time to do it because you typically, you might not feel hungry right away after a workout, but then eventually that, post-workout feeling hits you and you're like, I could eat the whole fridge. So doing it at a time where, you might feel most susceptible to that is great. So those are essentially kind of working through that digestive tract to make sure that everything is going through our system. Okay. It's, I don't love the word reset, but it's going to kind of get everything on out of us so that we can build up that GI tract with all of those good nutrients and probiotics again. I think the majority of Americans, again, maybe we don't realize it, but have some form of IBS or IBD. And so it's going to kind of get those muscles working in the way that, again, are keep us going, keep us healthy.
Why is it also important to move? Right. Get the body moving, even if you're not, you don't have to go running it per se to start. So what's the importance of starting to move?
Yes. So the benefits of exercise, again, are, I'd be remiss to say that it's not great for our mental health. So keeping that going. So we think 2 tracks, and the book does explain this pretty well, that we've got cardiovascular health from the benefits of, that cardiovascular exercise. So whether that's walking at a brisk pace or even just doing intervals of faster walk, slower walk. Maybe you run, elliptical, Stairmaster, whatever, that's great for your health, for your heart health. We want to keep the blood moving through our body to all portions, and so doing so, we're keeping those blood vessels expanding and contracting so that they're nice and, expandable and not getting really taut and clogged with all the things. So, again, benefits of that are that we're obviously moving the blood through our body, as well as we are burning energy when we're doing that. So, it's definitely in that benefit category. When we think of strength training, we are doing, essentially a favor to our bones, our muscles. We're building that lean body mass as well as our skeletal system. And then we're also, by increasing our lean body mass, we're increasing our metabolism. So we are essentially getting that, people have heard the after effect of that strength training.
Yes.
Well, with more lean body mass, we are able to burn a higher energy expenditure at rest. The general recommendations are 150 minutes a week. So however you want to break that up, if that's 10 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes in the afternoon, great.
That's perfect. Okay, some of our testers are like, oh, I'm so tired after the first week. Is this normal? I'm getting headaches. So why does that type of stuff happen, and what could they expect?
Exactly. So when we start any new way of life or eating or exercise, our body's going to say something. It would be unexpected if you didn't feel a different kind of way. So number one, with headaches, water is super, super important, and making sure that you're getting enough electrolytes. So your body's going through shifts, so make sure that you are getting enough water, hydration, as well as electrolytes, especially if you're sweating, working out more, and exercising. In terms of being tired, you might notice that, we're, by way of eating cleaner, you are probably ingesting less calories, and so less calories is essentially calories is energy. So I don't want you to feel like you are in this huge, huge calorie deficit.
Yeah.
So leaning into the foods that are on the plan, and having an extra snack so that you're not, ready to eat your arm off, or passing out when you're trying to do normal activities. So, just being mindful of getting enough energy within kind of staying in those lanes.
Perfect. Okay, let's talk about how much water we should be drinking, and can you go overboard? Is there such thing as too much water?
Yeah, good question. So generally speaking, the benchmark is half of your body weight in pounds in ounces. So for a 150-pound individual, 75 ounces of water a day is encouraged. Again, start slow with that. If you barely drink a glass, work up to 2. Okay, the next day, let's shoot for 30 ounces, and then make your way up to that 75 mark. As far as too much water, special health conditions may, lean into that. So if you have cardiac issues or kidney issues, again, talk to your doctor about, if there is a limit. Otherwise, it would be hard to overdo it. You'd just be going to the bathroom a lot. But again, a normal human, it would be hard to really kind of overhydrate.
So I've heard it talked about, water is kind of like the importance of having oil in your car. Yeah. It keeps everything. So why is it important to stay hydrated?
Yeah, so it is an enzyme or a substrate in a lot of the reactions that are going on. So it's moving things in our blood. It's a part of blood. It's a part of a lot of our hormones. It's also a part of burning energy. So essentially in the equation of burning ATP, which is our energy or calories, we need water as a player for making that burn. So they've actually found that individuals that are more hydrated typically burn more and are more efficient at doing all of the things. So it is basically around for everything and keeping things flowing.
Okay, so this happens. People are like, I'm in it, I'm doing well, and then they cheat. They have a cookie. They get off track. What is your advice there?
Yeah, so leaving behind the all or nothing mentality is very important. Perfection is something that so many of us strive for, and I just want to lay out that you probably won't be perfect, and life happens. So have that, enjoy it, and then move on. And the next meal, the next day, you're right back on it, and you're continuing on. Remember that that 21 days is kind of, again, we'll get to that, and then we work on graduating from there and continuing the lifestyle. But just ditch the need to be perfect or that all or nothing.
Would you just say jump right back in?
Jump right back in, yeah.
Okay, why is it, so explain why they cut alcohol out of this. So what does alcohol do to your body that could halt the process a little bit?
Yeah, so alcohol really doesn't do anything beneficial for other than obviously other than we like it, and it's a social enjoyment, and it's it's obviously it does do things. But in terms of for our health, it does play a somewhat of a antioxidant effect if we're thinking like red wine. But essentially it's a non-nutritive item. Think of it like pop or soda or juice. It's providing us calories without any nutritional benefit. And a lot of the calories that we get from that are either turned directly to fat or, make us feel sluggish, and it causes a spike in insulin, which essentially is sometimes we wake up and we have that craving for foods because our blood sugar is low. So it's kind of doing a couple of things.
Thank you. Okay. Now, another buzzword is community.
Yeah.
How important is it, what would you suggest, that having a supportive community around you when you're making lifestyle changes? For me, it's been helpful. Have you seen that as well?
Definitely. I mean, the community aspect for diet, for lifestyle, for nutrition is super helpful. We learn more from others, and that shared we're in the trenches. And again, not that you're going to be in the trenches,
Right.
but just that like, emotion and that uplifting sense of like togetherness is so, so helpful. And, learning recipes from others or products or brands or just ways of doing things is exponentially, sometimes more than we can even get from our, learn from ourselves. So definitely lean into the community, the accountability. Maybe you like peg a certain person to really kind of keep you on track and keep you uplifted. So definitely.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, what should people consider when they're adding carbs back in? You don't want to go overboard.
Right. You don't want to go overboard, and you kind of want thinking about, when we add carbs back, again, back to that purpose. Mm-hmm. So when we think about dairy, what purpose is it playing? So is it, and enjoying it too. So like you want to enjoy what you're incorporating. If, the bread from the bread basket, take it or leave it, then, leave it. Enjoy the item, and make it serve that purpose, especially if you're a big runner or strength training. Like make sure that those are kind of helping you along for your energy with that. But just savor, enjoy it, and be mindful of the source and the preparation of it.
Okay, so many of our testers they lost pounds, they lost inches. How can you maintain this lifestyle?
So maintenance, again, sometimes can be the hardest part. Mm-hmm. And I think living in that week 3 is kind of a good sweet spot of,
okay.
You've got all of the, all of our food groups are present, and just thinking about that balance of anytime I go into a meal or a snack and thinking, okay, I want at least a protein and a carbohydrate here, or a fat and a protein here. So we're always getting, a good source of macronutrients at every meal, every snack for balance and fullness and good energy. From there, I would say, also kind of really examining hunger versus appetite.
Okay.
In our daily lives. And so much of what we are driven to eat is appetite and, social situations. And again, lean into those things, enjoy them. But remember that, again, just because we can doesn't mean we have to or we should. And all of those treats and things will always be around, so that all or nothing mentality doesn't always have to, be our driving force.
Sometimes it is more expensive to eat healthy. I mean, it's a lot easier to buy a 99-cent cheeseburger than it is to like go to the grocery store. But can you kind of touch on that, how it really is worth it down the line?
Down the line, yeah, absolutely. It may seem like that initial investment of like, I'm spending more at the grocery store, but down the road, preventatively, mm-hmm. we are avoiding chronic disease that, could be costing thousands of dollars a month, and whether it's doctor's visits, prescriptions, adjuncts, therapies, different things that are just, again, totally preventable. So, that initial investment may seem like a lot, but at the end of the day, it's so worth, the, months, years of life that you're going to just continuously feel good. I would also say to lean into, alternate forms of, frozen produce or, canned beans and things that you can really kind of stretch your budget a little bit. So it's nice, it's possible, to kind of get the best of both worlds in that regard.
Now, there are some myths that there is not a lot of nutrients in the canned or frozen. Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. So kind of a misconception, honestly, because in our frozen items, again, frozen items that are just the broccoli or just the spinach are essentially flash frozen when they're picked at like their peak ripeness. And so the nutrients are actually locked in there. So I will actually sometimes encourage those items, especially in the dead of winter when, peppers might not be seasonal, because there's actually less chance of them having, the nutrients broken down or not being quite as nutritious or flavorful at that time of year. So they really actually have maybe more than sometimes the apples or the, strawberries we get, because they were frozen, they're locked in versus, traveling to the producer and then the store and then they sit on the shelf. So they actually might have sometimes more than your conventional frozen or fresh.
How important is portion control?
Portion control is huge. It's, I think one of the biggest, turning points in learning realizations is that, using your hands as kind of your portion guide for proteins, for vegetables, unlimited amounts of those. But think about the hand rule when you're entering into a meal. Protein, we've got our grains, and then honestly, unlimited fruits and vegetables. Okay. It's a good way to make sure you're getting enough so your body can efficiently utilize that in one sitting, and then, spiral from there.
Your advice for someone that's starting the program, your advice for success, or just really some things that you tell your clients.
Yeah, absolutely. So advice would be, take it piece by piece, slow and steady implementation. Know that this is, feel free to reach out to someone if you have specific questions about, certain allergies or dietary restrictions. Like, you're not alone. You can reach out to someone and make sure that you've got, the tools for your toolbox. I would say to get excited about it and just to know that, like, you are going to, like, lean into this person, that, your full potential with it, and, just to be excited and keep that mentality of, it's not something we want you to dread or feel like you're being punished. It's, it's an exciting thing. You might find that some of your favorite foods you've been avoiding just because you didn't know how to prepare green beans. So think of it kind of like a fun adventure of, like, getting into some different foods and ways of eating, and a new lifestyle that you are going to feel good about. So I think first and foremost as well, think about the feeling, and the outcomes will come. So if we're chasing a number, if we're chasing, a certain size, or again, a number,
right,
that can lead to, that ever elusive 5 more or this or that. Yeah. But really focus on that feeling of, how am I feeling mentally? How's my body feeling? More energy. And then, some of those goals of, like, I want to be able to run a mile, or, performance based, I think is a really good way to see those outcomes really thrive.